As laughter filled the hall, I lowered my eyes. My brother's fiancée clinked her glass and said loudly, "Some of us here will never know success." The room erupted in cruel giggles, and my parents joined in. I gripped my fork so tightly my hand shook. What they didn't know was that the guest of honor, the CEO, had come because of me, and when he stood up, everything changed. The dinner hall was filled with music, laughter, and shining decorations for Kofi's engagement. Everyone was celebrating, but for Nia, the night felt heavy. She sat quietly at the far end of the long table, watching her parents beam with pride at her brother and his bride-to-be. The clinking of glasses and cheerful voices surrounded her, yet her heart felt like it was sinking. Her aunt leaned over and whispered loud enough for others to hear, "Ah, Nia, look at your brother. He makes the family proud. When will you stop being a burden?" The words stung, and a ripple of laughter followed from the relatives nearby. Nia lowered her eyes, pretending not to hear, but every insult settled inside her like a stone. Her mother joined in, smiling brightly at Kofi but turning cold eyes toward her. "See how hard work pays, Nia? Unlike some people who just drift with no direction." The comparison was clear, and the table shook with soft giggles. Even her father added, "At least one child knows how to bring honor to this family." The spotlight was on Kofi, but the shadow of mockery fell fully on Nia. Kofi's fiancée, dressed in sparkling jewels, clinked her glass and looked directly at Nia. "Some of us will never know success," she said, her voice dripping with pride. The room erupted in cruel laughter, and even her parents laughed along, their joy at her brother's glory making them blind to Nia's pain. Nia's chest tightened, her fingers wrapping around her fork so hard that her hand shook slightly. She wanted to defend herself, to shout that she was not a failure, but the words stayed trapped inside her. She kept her face calm, though inside she felt her dignity crumbling. Every comment, every cruel laugh cut deep, but instead of answering back, Nia swallowed her hurt. She kept silent, her lips pressed together, her eyes fixed on the table. No one noticed the quiet fire in her gaze, hidden beneath her calm expression. Her silence was not weakness. It was a storm waiting. While her family believed she had nothing to show, they had no idea that the night would soon belong to her. For now she sat quietly, absorbing every insult, every wound, every comparison. She knew her moment was coming, and when it did, the same people who mocked her would have no words left to say. While the family continued their laughter and cruel jokes, Nia kept her head down, but inside her heart she carried a truth no one in that room could ever imagine. They thought she was the forgotten one, the girl who had failed to achieve anything. But what they did not know was that behind her quiet face was a secret she had been guarding carefully, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. For months, Nia had been working with one of the biggest international tech companies. It had started as a small opportunity, something she worked on late at night while everyone in the house slept. Slowly, her ideas grew, her designs became stronger, and soon her work had caught the attention of people far beyond her hometown. The company believed in her, trusted her, and gave her a chance to lead a project that could change lives. But Nia never spoke about it. She stayed silent when her parents mocked her. She stayed silent when her relatives asked why she wasn't as rich or famous as her brother. Silence became her shield, because she knew that bragging or defending herself would only bring more insults. She wanted her success to speak for itself, not her words. Even now, as her family compared her to Kofi and called her a failure, she held her secret tightly inside. No one at that table knew that the very CEO everyone admired so much was actually coming that night to honor her, not her brother. They believed she had nothing, but the truth was she had built something far greater than they could ever imagine. Her eyes lifted slightly as she looked around the room. Every person there thought they knew her story. To them, she was the quiet daughter, the one who never made the family proud. They did not see the hours she spent working, the sacrifices she made, the faith she had in herself even when no one else believed. Nia took a small breath, her chest rising with a calm strength. She did not need to defend herself tonight. The secret she carried would do it for her. Soon, the same voices that mocked her would be silenced, and the same people who laughed at her would be forced to see the truth. For now she stayed quiet, letting them enjoy their pride, unaware that their world was about to change. The celebration grew louder, and the table was full of smiles, but Nia felt every word cut through her heart. Her parents could not stop praising Kofi, their voices filled with pride as if the world revolved around him. Her father raised his glass high and said, "Kofi has chosen well. He has brought honor to this family by marrying into wealth and respect. This is what success looks like." His eyes then shifted to Nia, sharp and cold. "Not everyone is capable of such wisdom. Some people will always depend on others to survive." The words hung heavy in the air, and relatives nodded in agreement. Her mother quickly added, "We always told our children to make good choices. Look at Kofi. He worked hard and picked a fiancé who will only lift him higher." "But Nia," she paused, shaking her head as if she was truly disappointed. "Nia never listens. She still does not understand life. Without us, where would she even be?" The guests chuckled, some whispering among themselves, while Nia sat still, her hands resting in her lap. She forced herself not to show how much the comments hurt. Inside, her heart twisted, but her face remained calm, her eyes lowered. Every sentence her parents spoke was like a knife, but instead of breaking her, it pushed her determination deeper. Her parents continued, their voices loud enough for everyone to hear. "Kofi will build a powerful future with his wife's family," her father said proudly. "But Nia? She is still searching, still wandering, still needing help. One day, maybe she will learn." The relatives smiled politely, but many of them looked at Nia with pity, their expressions saying more than words. Kofi's fiancée leaned closer to her future in-laws and said sweetly, "You raised such a wonderful son. He knows what success means. Not everyone has that blessing." The way she looked at Nia made it clear who she was speaking about. The laughter that followed burned Nia's chest, but she stayed silent. She did not argue, did not defend herself. Instead, she let the fire inside her grow. Every cruel comparison, every reminder of her supposed failure, only fueled her strength. They believed she would always depend on them, but Nia knew the truth was different. She was not weak, not lost, and not hopeless. She was building her own future, one they could not take away from her. So she sat quietly, allowing them to speak, letting their pride blind them. Deep inside, she promised herself that soon, they would see who she really was. And when that moment came, no one would ever dare compare her again. The hall was alive with celebration when the doors slowly opened, and a tall man in a fine suit stepped inside. Conversations stopped for a moment as heads turned. The whispers spread quickly around the table. "That's him, the CEO." Eyes widened with excitement, and smiles stretched across every face. The guests believed his presence was another sign of Kofi's greatness. Kofi's father stood immediately, clapping proudly as if he had personally invited the man. "What an honor," he said loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Even the great CEO has come to celebrate my son." Relatives nodded in admiration, while Kofi sat straighter, his chest puffed with pride. His fiancée squeezed his hand, whispering, "This proves how important you are. Look who came for you." The room filled with energy as everyone prepared to welcome the guest. They rushed to clear a space at the front table, and glasses were lifted, ready to toast Kofi again. People leaned close to each other, whispering about how powerful connections would now flow into the family. All the attention circled around Kofi, painting him as the golden child once more. But at the far end of the table, Nia stayed still. Her eyes followed the CEO quietly, her heart beating faster with every step he took. She knew the truth, the secret she had carried for months. This man had not come for Kofi, not for the wealth of his fiancé's family, but for something much deeper, something connected to her. Her palms felt warm, and for a second she pressed them against her dress to steady herself. The moment she had been waiting for was finally here. Still, she did not move, she did not rush. Her calm face gave nothing away, while inside her heart raced. The pride her parents carried, the mocking words they had thrown at her, all of it was about to shift. Kofi lifted his glass, ready to claim the honor, but Nia only watched quietly, a small spark of strength shining in her eyes. She allowed everyone else to believe their story for a little longer. They thought the CEO's presence was for Kofi, but soon the truth would unfold in a way none of them expected. Nia sat silently, knowing the dinner was about to change. The same voices that laughed at her would soon fall into silence, and the same faces filled with pride for Kofi would soon turn pale in shock. Glasses were raised high as the music softened and everyone prepared for toasts. Kofi's father gave the first one, praising his son for bringing honor to the family and speaking proudly about the bright future ahead. The guests clapped, and Kofi smiled wide, enjoying every word. Then it was Kofi's turn. He stood slowly, holding his glass with confidence, and looked around the room as if he was king of the night. I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate me and my beautiful fiancé, he began. And of course, we must also thank the CEO for coming all this way. It is not every day someone this powerful walks into our family dinner. Truly, this shows the level we have reached. Applause filled the room. Then Kofi's eyes shifted toward Nia at the end of the table, and his smile changed into something sharp. Not everyone can attract such a guest, he said slowly. Some people will never know what it feels like to be noticed by greatness. A ripple of laughter passed through the hall. The relatives nodded, some covering their mouths to hide their amusement. Nia's father laughed openly, slapping his hand against the table. He is right, he said proudly. Success attracts success. Those who fail will never understand. His words carried across the room, and the guests clinked their glasses in agreement. Kofi's fiancée leaned forward next, her eyes fixed on Nia. Her smile was sweet, but her words carried poison. I am just grateful I am marrying into a family that shines so brightly. Some of us women are lucky to stand beside strong men like Kofi. Others, she paused deliberately, her gaze not leaving Nia. Others will just keep waiting. Because who would ever notice them? The room erupted again in laughter, cruel and mocking. Nia sat perfectly still, her hand tightening around her glass. Her lips pressed together, but her eyes stayed calm. Every word, every insult, settled into her chest like fire. She wanted to respond, but she knew the time was not yet right. They had no idea how close they were to humiliating themselves. Her parents leaned closer to the guests, proudly repeating how Kofi was the shining star. While Nia was still searching for her path, they treated the comparison like a joke, but it was meant to remind everyone of Nia's supposed failure. The atmosphere was filled with pride and arrogance, each laugh digging the knife deeper into her heart. But deep down Nia felt no shame. Instead, their words gave her strength. They were celebrating Kofi and mocking her, never realizing that the very guest they admired most was not there for him at all. Their arrogance would soon collapse, and when the truth came out, their laughter would turn into silence. The clinking of glasses and laughter still echoed when the CEO finally stood from his seat. His presence alone demanded attention, and the room immediately went quiet. Every pair of eyes turned toward him, expecting words of praise for Kofi. The proud smiles on Kofi's parents' faces grew wider, already imagining the glory about to be spoken. Kofi himself adjusted his jacket, preparing to accept compliments he thought belonged to him. The CEO began with a warm smile. It is an honor to be here tonight, he said clearly, his voice steady. The family leaned forward eagerly, waiting to hear their son's name lifted high. For a moment, the air was thick with pride and anticipation. Then, instead of turning to Kofi, the CEO's eyes searched the room until they landed on Nia. Slowly, he stepped away from his seat and walked directly toward her. The hall froze. Whispers rushed across the table as guests exchanged confused glances. Kofi's smile faltered, and his fiancée blinked in disbelief. But the CEO ignored the stares and stopped right beside Nia. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and said with confidence, "Tonight, I want to raise a toast to my trusted partner and the brilliant mind behind our next global launch, Nia." The words struck the hall like a wave. Gasps escaped from nearly every guest, and silence followed so heavily it was almost sharp. Nia's parents froze in their chairs, their proud expressions. While Nia was still searching for her path, they treated the comparison like a joke, but it was meant to remind everyone of Nia's supposed failure. The atmosphere was filled with pride and arrogance, each laugh digging the knife deeper into her heart. But deep down Nia felt no shame. Instead, their words gave her strength. They were celebrating Kofi and mocking her, never realizing that the very guest they admired most was not there for him at all. Their arrogance would soon collapse, and when the truth came out, their laughter would turn into silence. The clinking of glasses and laughter still echoed when the CEO finally stood from his seat. His presence alone demanded attention, and the room immediately went quiet. Every pair of eyes turned toward him, expecting words of praise for Kofi. The proud smiles on Kofi's parents' faces grew wider, already imagining the glory about to be spoken. Kofi himself adjusted his jacket, preparing to accept compliments he thought belonged to him. The CEO began with a warm smile. "It is an honor to be here tonight," he said clearly, his voice steady. The family leaned forward eagerly, waiting to hear their son's name lifted high. For a moment, the air was thick with pride and anticipation. Then, instead of turning to Kofi, the CEO's eyes searched the room until they landed on Nia. Slowly, he stepped away from his seat and walked directly toward her. The hall froze. Whispers rushed across the table as guests exchanged confused glances. Kofi's smile faltered, and his fiancée blinked in disbelief, but the CEO ignored the stares and stopped right beside Nia. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and said with confidence, "Tonight, I want to raise a toast to my trusted partner and the brilliant mind behind our next global launch, Nia." The words struck the hall like a wave. Gasps escaped from nearly every guest, and silence followed so heavily it was almost sharp. Nia's parents froze in their chairs, their proud expressions turning into shock. Her father's glass nearly slipped from his hand. Her mother's mouth opened, but no words came out. The arrogance that filled the room only moments ago now crumbled into confusion. Kofi stared, his face pale, his jaw clenched as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. His fiancée's glass shook until it slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. All the laughter, all the mocking words from before, disappeared into stunned silence. Every guest turned to look at Nia, their eyes wide, their expressions shifting from pity to admiration. Nia felt her chest rise as she took a quiet breath. Her heart was racing, but her face stayed calm, her eyes steady. She had waited for this moment, holding her secret through every insult, every cruel comparison. Now, without saying a word, her truth stood in the open, carried by the CEO's voice. The CEO continued proudly, "This young woman has shown me brilliance, hard work, and vision beyond her years. It is her ideas that will shape the future of our company." His words filled the room, leaving no doubt about who the real success was. The silence was no longer mocking. It was awe. And in that moment, the power at the table shifted forever. The CEO's words hung in the air like a heavy curtain, silencing every corner of the hall. For a moment no one moved. Then slowly, the shock spread across every face at the table. The same relatives who had laughed at Nia only minutes before now sat frozen, their eyes wide, their smiles gone. The proud expressions of her parents collapsed as if the ground had shifted beneath them. Her father's chest, once puffed with pride for Kofi, now sank as he stared at Nia in disbelief. Her mother's lips trembled, caught between confusion and shame. Kofi's jaw tightened, his face pale. He had been so certain the honor belonged to him, so sure that the CEO had come to recognize his achievements. Now he sat stiff in his chair, his glass clutched so tightly his knuckles turned white. The weight of humiliation pressed down on him, and he could not even lift his eyes to meet the guests who had witnessed his downfall. Beside him, his fiancée tried to keep her composure, but her hand shook as she reached for her drink. The glass slipped from her fingers, crashing against the floor. All heads turned to her, but she could not hide her disbelief. Her plan to shine by marrying into greatness had cracked in a single moment. The man she thought stood above everyone had just been overshadowed by the sister they had mocked. The relatives who had joined in the laughter earlier now sat in silence, too stunned to speak. Some looked at Nia with new respect, others with guilt for the cruel words they had spoken. Their arrogance melted into shame as they realized the one they dismissed as a failure was the very person standing at the center of something far greater than Kofi's wealth or his engagement. Nia's parents exchanged a glance, their pride shattered. The mother who had compared her daughter so harshly could not form a single word. The father who had declared Kofi the only true success now struggled to breathe under the weight of truth. The atmosphere of celebration had turned into an atmosphere of reckoning, every face showing the same pale shock. Nia sat quietly, her calmness contrasting with the chaos around her. She did not smile or gloat. She simply looked ahead, her dignity shining brighter than any jewel in the hall. The same people who had mocked her were now forced to face what they had done. The arrogance they carried had crumbled, and all that was left was silence and shame. In that moment, the power in the room shifted completely. No one looked at Kofi with admiration anymore. Every eye was on Nia, the woman they had underestimated, the one who had proven them all wrong without saying a single word. All eyes were fixed on Nia as the CEO's words echoed through the hall. The tension was thick, and the silence from her family felt loud. Then the music that had once filled the room. Everyone seemed to wait for Nia to stand and boast, to throw their insults back at them, but she did nothing of the sort. Slowly, she rose from her seat, her movements calm and steady, her face gentle yet strong. The CEO looked at her with respect, his hand still resting lightly on her shoulder. Nia turned to him first and gave a small nod. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice soft but clear enough for all to hear. There was no prideful tone, no arrogance in her words, only gratitude and dignity. She accepted his recognition not as a weapon against her family, but as a truth that needed no further proof. The hall remained frozen. Her parents stared, unable to believe their daughter was being honored in such a way. Kofi's eyes burned with humiliation, and his fiancée sat stiff, still shaken by the glass that had slipped from her hands. Relatives who once laughed at Nia now shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces red with embarrassment. Yet Nia herself did not seek to humiliate anyone. She did not look around to remind them of their cruelty. Instead, she kept her gaze forward, her composure unshaken. She continued in her calm tone, addressing the CEO. "I am grateful for the opportunity to work with your company. It has been an honor to contribute to something that can bring change to people's lives. I look forward to giving my best in the work ahead." Her words carried humility, but also quiet power. Each sentence showed that she was not only capable, but deeply grounded in her success. The contrast was striking. Only minutes earlier, the family had mocked her, using laughter to cover their arrogance. Now she stood in the same room, steady and graceful, her dignity shining brighter than the chandeliers above. The same people who thought she was weak could see that she had more strength than they ever imagined. Not the strength of anger, but the strength of restraint. Nia sat back down slowly, her posture straight, her expression calm. She did not need to add anything more. The CEO's words had already lifted her higher than their insults could ever pull her down. Her silence spoke louder than any victory speech. While her family sank into shame, Nia's grace made her rise even taller. In that moment, the difference between her and them was clear. She had nothing to prove, because the truth had already spoken for her. The hall stayed heavy with silence even after Nia sat down, her calm response still hanging in the air. Then slowly, like a wave, the mood began to change. Relatives who had laughed at her earlier started shifting in their seats, their smiles returning, but this time filled with guilt. One aunt leaned forward first, her voice soft and nervous. "Nia, my dear, we always knew you had something special. You've just been quiet about it. You've made us proud tonight." Her words were shaky, as if she hoped they would erase the insults she had thrown only minutes before. Another uncle quickly added, "Yes, yes. I always said you were smart. Look at you now, working with such a big company. We are lucky to have you in this family." The same people who had mocked her were now bending their words, trying to rewrite the story, acting as though they had always supported her. Her parents joined in, their pride from Kofi shifting suddenly toward Nia. Her mother forced a smile, her voice trembling. "Nia, you should have told us about this. We would have celebrated you too. You know we only want the best for you." Her father nodded quickly, adding, "Yes, you have surprised us all. This is a great achievement. You've brought honor to the family after all." Their words sounded warm, but the cracks in their voices revealed their shame. Nia listened silently, her face calm, her hands resting gently in her lap. She did not interrupt them, nor did she rush to forgive. Inside, she understood clearly. These apologies were not born from love, but from embarrassment. They had mocked her when they thought she was nothing. Now that they saw her success, they wanted to claim her as their pride. The balance at the dinner table had shifted completely. Just an hour earlier, all attention had been on Kofi, every toast and every word lifting him high above his sister. Now no one even looked at him. His face remained pale, his jaw clenched, his fiancée avoiding his eyes. The glory that once belonged to him had been pulled away and placed on the sister they all dismissed. Nia did not need their approval anymore. She had carried herself through silence, through pain, through their cruel words, and she had risen without their support. Their sudden change of tone no longer mattered to her. She did not crave their acceptance, because she had already proven her worth beyond their small opinions. As the guests continued to praise her, trying to cover their shame with sweet words, Nia remained steady. She had not fought for their respect. It had simply shifted to her, naturally, permanently. From that night on, the family could never see her as the failure again. The power at the table now belonged to her. Nia rose slowly from her chair, her movements calm but full of quiet strength. All eyes turned to her again, waiting to see what she would do next. She placed her hands gently on the edge of the table, her chin lifted, her gaze sweeping across every relative who had laughed at her earlier. The room felt charged, as if every breath had paused, waiting for her words. Her voice was steady, neither loud nor harsh, but it carried enough weight to silence every whisper. For years, she began, her eyes locking on her parents, then drifting to her uncles, aunts, and cousins. You mocked me. You called me the forgotten one, the quiet one, the girl who would never achieve anything. You made me feel like I had no seat at this table. She paused, her words sinking deep into their hearts, the shame on their faces plain to see. Then she straightened her back, her tone unwavering. Tonight you learned the truth. I never needed your validation. I never needed your praise. I built my own path, and I created my own place at this table. The words hung heavy in the air, sharp and undeniable, cutting through years of judgment and dismissal. The hall erupted with applause, not from her family, but from the guests who had witnessed everything. Strangers, friends, and company officials clapped with admiration, their cheers echoing off the walls. Some even rose to their feet, moved by the dignity and strength in her voice. The sound of clapping filled the room, but around her own family, there was only silence. Her relatives sat frozen, their faces burning with shame. The very people who had once boasted and laughed now stared at their plates, unable to meet her eyes. Kofi shifted uncomfortably, his fiancée's hand slipping from his arm. Her parents looked as though the ground had given way beneath them, their pride shattered, their arrogance exposed. Nia did not gloat, nor did she smile. She simply stood there, her presence commanding, her words final. She had closed a chapter in her life, not with anger, but with truth. In that moment, everyone in the hall knew the balance had changed forever. Nia had spoken not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been silenced, belittled, or cast aside. She had shown that respect is not begged for. It is earned, and once it shifts, it cannot be taken back. As the applause grew louder, Nia sat back down, her face calm, her spirit unshaken. She did not need their approval then, and she would never need it again. She had her place, and no one could ever take it from her. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Hit like, drop a comment about your favorite moment, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that respect is earned, not given.